Y'all, it's raining outside and it looks really miserable, really depressing, just dreary. And it kind of fits the whole mood of the world right now and the mood of this video, because today we are going to be talking about the wild, bizarre case of Elisa Lam. Hello?
You look nice. What you got on? Can you clean up? They can hear me?
Yeah, they can hear you. Yeah, no, you're fine. Okay, I'll clean up my room. So let's start from the beginning. Elisa Lam was born April 30th, 1991 in Vancouver, Canada, to two parents from Hong Kong. Her parents and family actually owned a restaurant in Burnaby, I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but it's a city outside or town outside of Vancouver. At the time of the incident, she was a 21-year-old student who attended the British Columbia University. She was a fan of Ryan Gosling's music. Her favorite song by him was called Buried in the Water. So Ryan Gosling, the actor, was not just singing by himself. He's actually in a band called Dead Man's Bones, and this is the song. I found it, and we're going to listen to it. Elisa Lam's case, if you don't know about it, I mean, we're talking about it today, but this is a very popular case, and a lot of you probably already know the details of what has happened or how she's died. But if you don't know any of the details of Elisa Lam and what happened, and this is your first time hearing about it today, you'll see why Buried in Water and how this being her favorite song is really wild. Okay, that was quality. Not mad at it. Putting it in perspective, that song is creepy. But putting it out of perspective, that's a good song. Ryan Gosling did a good job. Most deem this case as an accidental drowning, but if you look at the strange details around the situation in the case, some say otherwise. A very popular case. It's a case that almost everyone knows about, that almost everybody has talked about, but it's one of those cases that truly sticks with you because it answers every single question except for why. It's frustrating, it's confusing, it's bizarre, it's wild, it's strange, it's odd. Insert every single synonym for weird. This is that case. And this isn't just a normal case. It isn't just a normal death because it never answers the question why. There are so many conspiracies that trail along with it and that come with it, and it's frustrating. So on January 26, 2013, Elisa Lam was traveling alone by Amtrak train. She was just arriving in LA and she was headed from San Diego, and from LA she was planning on going to Santa Cruz. So I just said a really big detail. She was traveling alone. She was on a solo trip around the West Coast. It was something that made her parents a little iffy and nervous about, which is totally valid. My parents would probably freak out a little bit too if I was just traveling around by myself. This was supposed to just be a fun little trip to have to get away from her college responsibilities. Remember, she's 21 years old. She's a student at British Columbia University. Everybody needs a break. College is rough. Like, moral of the story, college is rough. I understand why she wanted to just go do her own thing. She moved forward with traveling confidently, but she could not leave without making a deal with her parents first. So basically, this is understandable. Her parents just wanted her to contact them every single day just to make sure she was safe and okay and alive. I feel like everybody's family would be in the same boat. If you were traveling by yourself, you would have to call us or call them every single day, or FaceTime, whatever, text multiple times a day, just stuff like that. So Lam and her parents made a pact. So they would call and talk to each other every single day. So this is why 5 days later, on the day that she was actually supposed to check out of the hotel she was staying in, her parents found it weird that she didn't contact them at all. On January 31st, she did not contact her parents, and they immediately were like, what's up? What's going on? So the hotel that Elisa was staying at was called the Cecil, or is called the Cecil, which is located in downtown LA. It's only like a few blocks away from Skid Row, actually. The hotel has been open since 1927. Let that sink. 1927. Oh, when did the Titanic sink, actually? Is that like how far ago? How far ago? Is that how long ago it was? I'm gonna search that really fast. I'm curious. Was that like 1913? When was my grandma born? I have so many questions. 1912. I was really close. Anyway, yeah. The hotel was made in 1927. Moral of the story, it was a really long fucking time ago. And guys, the hotel has been connected to a whole timeline of just crime, violence, murder, suicide. It's just, the hotel has some history. For example, Black Dahlia murder and crime did not happen at the Cecil Hotel, but Elizabeth Short, who is the victim, the Black Dahlia, was actually seen at the bars in the hotel before the scene and incident happened. It also had serial killer residents Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, but he butchered people, so I don't care if I'm disrespecting him.
And
Not only did it harbor murderers and all that jazz, a string of suicides have also happened in the Cecil Hotel. Don't quote me on this. I remember reading this and I can't remember if it's true or not, so we're freeballing it. I'm gonna say it anyway. I remember reading, but don't quote me on this, that someone jumped from the Cecil, the hotel building, and was committing suicide. And when they landed, they actually landed on another person and killed that person too. I'm not sure if this is a real incident that had happened at that hotel or if I'm like confusing it with something else, but I remember reading it somewhere. There's your background for where Elisa would be staying and was. And as soon as her parents couldn't reach her, they called the LAPD, who then immediately searched the premises. But when the police are done searching the premises and all around, they come up and find nothing. So at this point, she's just missing. So at this point, guys, again, she's just missing. No one knows where she is. They couldn't find anything. So the police release footage of her from the hotel. And this is where things start to get weird and strange and odd. This is where things start to take a weird turn, and this footage was actually taken the day of her disappearance. So the viral clip shows Lam stepping onto the elevator, pushing all the buttons, stepping in and out, poking her head out, and then completely stepping out. And this goes on for about 4 minutes. And in the footage, she's completely alone. Like, she's not with anybody, or at least no one is shown on camera. It's definitely strange. No one else was ever captured. When I watch the footage, I get chills. It's unsettling. So 2 weeks later, after the footage was released, her body was actually found on February 19th. Her body was actually, I see my dad. That's my dad. He's pulling up. Hey, Dad. You are my dad. You're my dad. Boogie, woogie, woogie. Coronavirus is happening. My dad still goes outside. I have been in the house for 3 days. Why is he not taking this seriously? Okay, anyway. She was found. Her body was discovered naked with her clothes floating next to her in one of the water tanks on the roof of the hotel, and she was found by a maintenance worker. Santiago Lopez was the maintenance worker who discovered her body. He was responding to multiple complaints from guests staying at the hotel, complaining about the water tasting weird and the water pressure being funky. So I'm gonna let that sink in. People were complaining about nasty water, nasty tasting water. Let that sink in, guys. Nasty tasting water. Do you know what that means? Could you imagine that? They did not know they were drinking. Oh, that's wild. I've known about this case and about this detail for a very long time. I've followed this case since it first happened, but I don't know, the more you go over it, no matter how many times you go over it and over it, it's still equally as shocking as it was when you first find out and realize that they were drinking a decomposing body. That is, yeah, okay. Okay, that's just so unsettling. I don't like that. Why do I enjoy learning about stuff like this? Am I fucked up? I'm fucked up. So a little detail to note about Elisa Lam is that she was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, and she was on 4 different medications. And one of those medications was Wellbutrin, and that was the only one that I recognized when I was reading what she was on. The other ones I can't pronounce, and I won't try to because I will completely not get the names right. But yeah, she was on some meds, like serious meds. So again, she had bipolar disorder and depression, and this Her mental illness was something that her family kept a secret, but according to them, she never had a history of suicide attempts or suicidal thoughts. Though she had never done that, according to her family, there was a brief period or a previous period where she had gone missing and disappeared before. Here's a quote from Katie Orphan, the owner of the Last bookstore in downtown LA. "It seemed like Lam had plans to return home, plans to give things to her family members and reconnect with them. She had recalled seeing Lam before her death or her disappearance." So that quote kind of makes things a little bit more frustrating because obviously, like, this wasn't on purpose. She wasn't doing this on purpose. And she had recalled seeing Lam before her death. So her autopsy results came in, and there were no signs of illegal substances or alcohol, but there were a number of medical drugs, which can be explained because, as I said before, she was medicated. She was on 4 different medications. So those being in her blood and in her system, it makes sense. So the key takeaways from her autopsy results are, number 1, she took at least 1 antidepressant that day. So the day of her death, she had at least 1 antidepressant in her system. Number 2, she had taken her second antidepressant and mood stabilizer recently, but not that day. Number 3, she had not taken any antipsychotics recently. So in conclusion, what you can take away from her autopsy is that she most likely didn't take her medications properly or correctly. And guys, she was on some pretty heavy medication. Like, these medications come with manic side effects if not taken right. Like, that is something that can potentially happen. Not taking your medication properly for like any drug in general can give you wonky side effects, but drugs for treating something like bipolar disorder and depression, they hit different. Those side effects can really mess up your system. Those side effects can include manic effects, which is like hallucinations, which if she was hallucinating and hearing things or seeing things, it would kind of explain the strange behavior in the footage that they had of her in the elevator. Amy Price, the hotel manager, actually supported this theory in court, and she stated that originally Lam had purchased a room to be shared, but because of complaints of odd behavior, Lam was moved into a private room and wasn't sharing with anybody. Cool, yeah, boom. We have an explanation on why her behavior was so strange, but we still do not have an explanation on why and how she ended up in one of the water tanks on the roof of the hotel. So no foul play was revealed in the autopsy, but the coroners actually said that they couldn't do a full examination of her body because they couldn't get any of her blood or examine her blood. There is no explanation of how she could have even gotten to the roof because all the doors are locked and alarmed. Like, her trying to get up there would trigger an alarm. All the access on all the doors are restricted to staff members. You need a key, they're locked. Unless she was helped by a staff worker, how would she have gotten up there? So first reading this, I was like, yeah, she totally could have been helped by a staff worker. But what if we all have off days at work? What if this was the one day some of those doors were unlocked because someone was just lazy or someone didn't do something right or forgot to do something? We all have those days at work where stuff like that happens. And who knows, maybe the hotel just didn't want to take blame and just covered it up. That's just me talking and me just freeballing it and saying what I thought, but who knows? Now I want you guys to completely ignore the question of how she got on the roof. How did she get into one of those water tanks? Naked. Guys, these water tanks are no joke. They are ginormous. It is 4 by 8 foot cylinders, and they're propped up on concrete blocks. And they also had no fixed access. Like, workers had to use a ladder, to even look at the water. There are so many things about her death that make it spooky, that make it scary, because it's just, there are a lot of aspects of it that we don't understand. But another thing that her death had, weirdly, is a lot of connections to things. For example, there was a movie that came out, I think 8 years before her death, and it was called Dark Waters. And I remember this movie, guys. This is what's wild. I weirdly remember this movie because when DVDs were a thing, guys, before you could get to the menu button and play your movie, you had to sit down and watch a bunch of trailers for different movies because it was like the cinematic experience at home. Wow, I missed that. Okay, anyway, yeah. I can't remember what movie I always was watching as a kid, but Dark Waters was one of the commercials or one of the trailers that would be played before I could get to my movie. And Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy was also a trailer played on that DVD, so if you guys also watched those trailers on DVD as a kid, what movie is that? Anyway, the point is the movie Dark Waters came out 8 years before her death, and this movie had strange connections to her death. It basically was her death, before her death. It's weird. It was a film about a young girl who drowns in a water tank at the top of her apartment building, and her body was also not discovered right away, and residents complained about weird tasting water. Sound familiar, guys? And that was 8 years. 8 years before her death even had happened. So that's creepy. That's really creepy. They even have the same detail of how it was discovered. Like, they even have the same detail of how their bodies were discovered. And that freaks me out. That gives me chills. I'm not okay. Another strange connection or coincidence that happened right after her death was that an outbreak of tuberculosis happened and occurred and arose in Skid Row. I can't say that word. I apologize. But the outbreak itself was not the connection or the coincidence. It was that the test kits that were passed around when this happened were called Lam Elisa. Wild. So this death comes with 4 theories, and the first one is that Elisa Lam was murdered. At the end of the day, we don't know what happened. It's still a mystery. There's no conclusive evidence that she was a victim of murder. There is a theory that she could have been murdered by a guest or a worker of the hotel. If not murdered by a worker, maybe even helped, because how else would she have managed to get through the doors that were alarmed without triggering it, or just into the water tank by herself? Again, the water tanks have no fixed access. They are huge. The doors are locked. So how did she manage to get up there? Police dogs did a whole search of the premise, and they did not find any trace of Lam anywhere, but one place they did not check was around the water tanks, and they could have missed just a bunch of stuff there, but okay, police. Okay. Another thing that I've thought about is if a worker did help her, or if the worker did commit a crime against her, they know where the cameras are. They know where the cameras are to avoid them. So maybe that's why it, like on the elevator footage, explains her strange behavior. Maybe someone was there, but they knew not to step in the light or they were gonna be caught. I don't know, just a thought. So another thing that goes with this theory is that Lam had Tumblr, and if you don't know what Tumblr is, it is a blogging social media app / site, and it is aesthetically pleasing. Yay. Anyway, she posted on her Tumblr that she was having issues with some creepers in the hotel, so this can insinuate that she was possibly being stalked or followed. Why, if she was being followed, why weren't they in the footage in the elevator? Why weren't they on camera? Well, again, if they were a worker, if she was being followed by someone, they could have possibly known about the cameras and where they were set up, so they purposely didn't come near her so they wouldn't be captured. Her Tumblr blog was actually updated after her death, and her phone was never found on her belongings. It was just never found in the hotel. Like, her phone was missing and her blog was being updated. So potentially the killer or the theft or the person who helped her, whoever, could have potentially took her phone and updated it. Or Tumblr also does have a feature, this can kind of be explained away, where you can post on your timeline, like in the queue or whatever, and set up exact time and dates of when you want certain things to post. Theory number 2, I'm not really going to go into, I'm just going to say what it is, and if you want to do more research on it, you can. So in reality, I'm only going to do 3 out of the 4 theories. Theory number 2 is that Elisa Lam was assassinated. This one I'm not going into because just know it. It was the one that didn't make sense to me. The title of the theory, it sounds pretty extreme, but to me, when I read it and got into it, I just don't think it's plausible, and so I'm not gonna talk about this one. Theory number 3 is paranormal activities. I do believe in spirits and ghosts and all that jazz, but I don't know. Looking at the footage and then applying this theory, it makes it's creepy. I said this earlier, but a number of things have happened in that hotel, like suicide, and maybe, just maybe, one of the ghosts, a spirit, possibly possessed her and forced her to commit suicide. I said this earlier, but a lot of things have happened in that hotel, so maybe what if a spirit possessed her and forced her to do this thing? I mean, could happen, right? right? Hotel's hauntings include people reporting that they've been choked by thin air, and someone actually died choking and her attacker was never found. So if she was killed by a ghost, could it be possible that Elisa Lam was murdered by a ghost? Another paranormal thing to think about is, was she playing the elevator game? And with the rules of the elevator game, this could explain why her behavior was so odd and just confused. Theory is that Elisa Lam killed herself. The 4 medications that she was taking, and from the sound of her autopsy, wasn't taking properly. It could be totally possible that she was having a psychotic episode and having hallucinations, and this would explain her behavior again on footage in the elevator and acting the way she was. She could have literally just been completely out of it, and a lot of people do think she accidentally drowned. So what if she really just did that? No matter how far you think you get in this case and understanding it, you always are stumped and thrown back a couple steps when you realize, oh, we still don't know why or how. What if the hotel's covering something up and we have no idea? Like, something could have just happened. That could have just been an off day at work where the doors happened to be unlocked and she had an episode and walked up there and accidents happen. There's just so many possibilities and theories that could possibly be it, and we may never know. So what do y'all think? Did this frustrate you? Did you hear about this case before? Because yeah, you probably have heard about this, but if you haven't, what'd you think? And what theory do y'all think it is? Like, do you think she accidentally drowned? Do you think she was possessed? Do you think the elevator game is actually not a game? Like, what do y'all think? There's so much fear happening in the world right now. I just had to put more out there, you know? With the rest of my quarantine day, I'm going to go enjoy some puppy videos. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Namaste. Have a good day, guys.